Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Javier Cifuentes-Faura from Spain. It is an honor to participate as a keynote speaker in the 4th International Conference on Social Psychology and Humanity Studies. In this conference, I will talk about support resources and technology for the inclusion of students with disabilities in the university. At all levels of education, including university education, attention to student diversity and to students with disabilities or special needs has become very important. Almost all countries have made changes in their educational legislation to promote the inclusion of all students. Although different terminology may be used in different national contexts, in general, in education, a person is considered to have special needs if they have a learning difficulty and/or disability that requires additional or different support to that normally received by others of a similar age. This is the case if they have some kind of barrier to learning, such as problems with reading, writing, or problem solving, which can sometimes be caused by a disability such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, or attention deficit disorder. Physical, mental, or sensory impairments that limit a person's ability are also considered disabilities. This positions special education as a resort-based response, specialized academic support, adaptation of infrastructures, adaptation of curriculum, teacher training, when a learner requires something different or additional to what is offered to others. Education is the key to the inclusion of people with some kind of need. The concept of inclusive education promoted by the Salamanca Statement seeks to address students with learning difficulties or disabilities. This is reflected in the 2030 Agenda, which enacts the 70 Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 4, which aims to ensure inclusive and quality education. True inclusion is about changing the awareness and organization of education systems and environments, focusing on the diversity of learning needs and abilities. Access to higher education is one of the most important factors for improving people's quality of life, and it's also one of the indispensable elements for the continuity of economic development. It is a way to be better prepared for all kinds of job opportunities. All the students with disabilities have a lower level of studies than the general population. They obtain worse results in degrees and are less likely to obtain a university degree, which consequently makes it more difficult for them to access and remain in the labor market. Most universities offer support for people with disabilities following regulatory or mandatory guidelines, although there is no homogeneous model and there is great diversity in their quality. For example, Kherson State Pedagogical University provides its students with an adapted architectural and spatial environment with raised graphic description of buildings, scenes with the name of classrooms embroidered, a mobile system to move a wheelchair user with a wireless assistant call, educational program for training volunteers for the development of skills to support people with disabilities, etc. In Spain, the Spanish university system has been adapting to the needs of students with some kind of diversity, carrying out inclusion projects and implementing or strengthening disability services. Since 2015, there has been an increase in the number of students in one-side training, largely due to the fact that universities are working closely to facilitate their inclusion. Nevertheless, the evolution of inclusive education varies across universities, and so do the resources and methods being developed to deal with diversity. Although most universities have elaborated inclusion guides, the information they contain is not always complete or updated, and they do not allow for the thorough comparison of inclusive measures, which makes it difficult to know quickly and reliably the real situation of higher education institutions in this area. So in this work, we propose the creation of an indicator to serve as a guide for people with disabilities and their families, showing the resources offered to support their inclusion in universities. This information can be provided simultaneously for all university institutions, which will make it possible to establish a ranking of the level of achievement of inclusive practices. Furthermore, this indicator is dynamic in the sense that it can be easily updated. As a practical case, the indicator has been developed for the case of Spanish universities, although this methodology it can be adapted to universities in any country in the world. Bearing in mind the diversity of support and technological resources that help students with disabilities, it is possible to construct an indicator that makes it possible to find out quickly and easily about the actions in terms of inclusion related to these resources in any university. This is a methodological proposal that has not been carried out formally in any set of universities. It allows a ranking to be obtained according to the value of the indicator, so that the universities that occupy lower positions in the ranking can take as a reference those that have a higher score and try to adopt some of their practices to improve in terms of inclusion. This indicator also has the advantage that it can be quickly adapted to any positive or negative changes, whether or not the resource is available that occur in each institution at any time. Based on an exhaustive list of resources that favor inclusion, areas of action can be defined, in each of which certain resources are placed. A score of 1 is given if the university has such a resource, and 0 if it does not. Universities that have met all the criteria in the area will achieve a score of 100% in that section. If, for example, a university achieves 40 of the 50 resources of which area is composed, its score would be 70.73%. So the value of the indicator for each area is calculated as you can see on the screen. This indicator is dynamic as it can be modified automatically and quickly in case any of the items undergoes a change of score. This would ideally be published on university web portals, which, just as they offer indicators on the sustainability resources at its disposal. In this way, students, professors, and the universities themselves could also monitor their own scores and notify possible changes so that the score and position in the ranking could be updated when new items are achieved, which would update the ranking. This index will also allow universities to identify areas for improvement in order to offer a greater number of resources, raising the quality of services. And in addition, they can take as a reference other universities that are better positioned according to the value of the indicator. So in order to comply with the international mandates and national instructions to universities on disability issues, universities have created a network of support services for people with disabilities. We are going to see the case of Spain. So in Spain, for example, there is the Spanish Network of Support Services for People with Disabilities at University, SAPTU, which was created in 2009 in collaboration with Student Affairs of CRUE. SAPTU has developed an online university guide for students with disabilities with various areas and items that gather information on the resources available at universities. This guide follows the recommendation made by the Spanish Committee of Representatives of People with Disabilities, conceived as a tool for guidance, reference, and support for universities when it comes to implementing one of the mandates of the current university legislation, which requires them to have a plan of care for students with disabilities at the university. The guide is the result of a project co-funded by the European Social Fund entitled Report on the Resources Available to Favor the Inclusion of Spanish University Students with Disabilities and consists of different areas with various items to measure inclusiveness. These include technological and information accessibility and resources for support and adaptations in the teaching, learning, and assessment process. The other areas refer to measures and actions in access to university to stimulate permanence and the continuation of studies, physical accessibility in university premises, and other programs related to sport or research. The selected areas are those that concentrate most of the basic resources needed to promote inclusive and quality education. Among the resources considered necessary are the adaptation of materials, providing content in Braille when necessary, or subtitling, and of the available spaces, adaptive furniture, or larger and more spacious places, both during the development of student learning and during examinations, as well as having the necessary staff to ensure that all adaptive practices are carried out. Flexibility in delivering assessments or extending the time to complete them is also highlighted. Likewise, in the curriculum, the competencies must be adapted, and the possible elimination or reduction of some content must be considered. A program of individualized tutoring and monitoring is also necessary, offering extraordinary tutorials and providing students with a faculty tutor or a specific tutor assigned specifically to that student. Technological resources are also present. All these resources are included in Area 3, Technological and Information Accessibility, and 4, Resources for Support and Adaptation in the Teaching, Learning, and Assessment Process. The items in Area 3 show the resources available for access to all types of information, and those in Area 4 are divided into 5 sub-areas of resources related to the teaching-learning process, exams and tests conducted, evaluation, curriculum, and individualized student tutoring. The score of each item has been obtained by combining the information offered by universities via their website, the SAPTU Network Guide, and University Foundation Guide for Attention to Disability in the University. The Spanish university system currently has 83 universities, of which 50 are public and 33 are private. The scores obtained for each area and the overall value of the indicator for these two areas can be shown in this work, and this ranking reveals the level of inclusive education achieved by the universities. The results should be considered with caution, as the main purpose of this section is to provide an example of the application of the indicator to understand how universities are adapting to the needs of the student body with the provision of adequate resources. It is important to bear in mind that the values obtained are conditioned by the search carried out, which, however exhaustive it might be, may have made some errors in the evaluation of some items. In this case, in this example, the University of Jaén obtained the highest score by fulfilling 49 of the 55 items, 89.09%, followed by the University Carlos III of Madrid and the University of Cádiz. The ordering by areas and sub-areas may differ from the general one. The University of Jaén, together with the Universities of Cádiz and Seville, all of them belonging to the same autonomous community, Andalusia, are in the top 10 of the best universities institutions in terms of resources for educational inclusion. The reason is the Resources Guide for Students with Disabilities in Andalusian Public Universities, elaborated by the Government of Andalusia, which shows the strong commitment in this autonomous community to ensure equal treatment and equal opportunities to all members of the university community. The University of Jaén offers a large number of support resources and means to people who have some kind of impairment that makes it difficult for them to use their abilities. Proof of this is that it has received several awards such as Organization Ability in the Telefónica Ability Awards for its commitment to the inclusion of people with disabilities. The University of Cádiz promotes accessibility by eliminating all architectural and communication barriers and organizes activities, conferences, and training courses to raise awareness among the educational community and citizens in general. In second place, between the two Andalusian universities, is University Carlos III of Madrid. The university is committed to promoting the integration of people with disabilities in the university community, giving them specific attention and guaranteeing non-discrimination. To this end, the university has a special department and a student guidance center to care for students with disabilities. And now we go with the main conclusion of this study. Universities are committed to promoting values that foster inclusive concepts and environments with the aim of granting equal opportunities in the access to higher education to all those who wish to do so. However, the specific measures to achieve inclusive education vary across universities, and so the evolution of inclusive education is uneven and depends largely on each university. And although universities provide information on how they have adapted to meet the needs of all students, this information is often outdated and contained in different documents, which makes it difficult to know quickly and reliably the real situation of higher education institutions in this area. The system must be adapted to include people with disabilities, not the other way around. The needs of all learners should be taken into account rather than planning for a standard learner and then making some adjustment to accommodate the limitation of learners with some kind of need or disability. Given the importance of knowing the support and technological resources available to universities to promote inclusive education and facilitate participation in higher education for students with disabilities, an indicator has been constructed to provide an overview of the resources available in educational institutions. The indicator is based on online information available on university websites and guides on disability and special needs provided by universities. Its potential lies in being an efficient tool in monitoring the action carried out to improve the inclusion of people with disabilities as it shows progress towards the goals of inclusive assessment. The information is useful for people with disabilities and their families, as it provides insights into the practice of the educational institution in this area. It is also useful for higher education institutions themselves and for staff involved in planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating inclusion by providing a better understanding of how to identify the resources available and lacking to support people with disabilities. So as an example, the indicator has been obtained for the Spanish public universities. Although its application has been presented for public university in Spain, this methodology is also valid for private universities and for universities in any country, considering the different resources each university has on inclusion. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. You can see my email on the screen. So if you have any doubt, don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.